Hello everyone, welcome back to the series of Oracle AI Agent Studio workflow agents. So this is episode 2 of the series where we are going to talk about workflow design patterns for the workflow agents within Oracle AI Agent Studio. And more importantly, we will also see how these actually look inside Oracle Fusion. And just a call out, if you have not watched the episode 1 yet, I will drop the link in the description or put the link on top. Go check that out first because it sets the foundation for everything we are going to cover today. And if you're new here, do hit subscribe so that you don't miss any episode in this series. And let's get into it. So before we go ahead and see how actually that looks like, we will try to understand what actually are the core workflow design patterns are. What are the building blocks which we need to build an AI agents, right? So before we build, we need to choose the pattern, right? So there are mainly four core patterns. And the good news is that you don't have to pick just one. You can compose them, right? And I will show you, right, how these will relate to the Oracle Cloud Workflow agents within AI Agent Studio. To start with the chaining, right? So chaining is the most common one because we are giving, let's say, step A, and let's say we are getting some output from that step. That becomes input for next step. Let's say for step 2, the input is going to be step 1 output, right? So we know it is highly deterministic, maybe great for extraction and then validation and decide and then act, right? So let's take an example of that from HR, right? Think resume processing, screening, and then interview scheduling. So because we have a job description for which we are hiring, so resume will be sent, that will be processed, screened, and then interview will be scheduled for the candidate. So it's like steps, sequential steps, right? So that's a chaining. Next is the parallel. So parallel is for when you want speed and higher confidence decision. We can launch multiple analysis branches at the same time, and then at the end we can merge them before making a decision, right? So when let's say a service ticket comes in, why not simultaneously look up similar past ticket, check the logs, and look up known fixes all in parallel, just like how Oracle support works, right? Because this AI thing comes into play, so it sometimes show me, okay, these are previous nodes which might be helpful, right? So this is checking that based on the data which I have entered, it is checking. So that's parallel thing. I'm just giving you an example. Switch, right? Switch is the routing layer. So based on the intent or the context, right, we can route it to the right subflow. Maybe let's I'm giving one example, random example. Let's say an invoice exception, right? If it is a price variance or missing receipt or a duplicate invoice, each of these may deserve a different resolution path. So we can use switch in that case because each will follow their own path for resolution. And the final one is the iteration. So iteration is for optimization, and we will keep looping and adjusting until a condition is satisfied. So maybe for planning workflows or doing, let's say, processing multiple times, like let's say we need to create, let's say, 5 invoices we are sending at once. Maybe we will process one by one. Or let's say if we uploaded Excel for 5 invoices and we want to process one by one, so we are looping it for each row. We'll process one by one using an API. So I'm just giving one example. So that's how we can do a iteration. So now moving on, so we have understood that these are the core design patterns which exist for a workflow. And I hope you are now convinced that workflow agents are the better approach. And now we will try to understand how do we actually design one. So where do we even start? So let me walk you through a 6 steps, and trust me, skipping any of these where most workflow agents could go wrong while building. So step one, we need to define the job to be done. And I want to be very specific here. The job is not the task, right? So let's say if you're processing an invoice, job isn't just creating an invoice. Job is to receive it, validate it. If it is a POMS, then match it to the PO and then finally make a payment, right? So that's the business outcome. We wanted to make a payment for our invoice, right? We are not just processing an invoice. So start with that outcome in mind and design your workflow backwards from there, right? Step two, set your execution boundaries, right? Who can access what, right? Where do you need separation of duties? And critically, where do you need a human to approve something? Versus where can agent just proceed, right? We need to define the guardrails before we build any agent, not after. So we have to decide, okay, what are my guardrails? Where I need to put a human. Step three is choose your orchestration pattern, right? Is this a straight line, like a step by step, one after another, or we need to do something in parallels? Do we need a different routing based on different conditions? We'll cover these pattern in detail in the next episodes, but at the design time, we need to sketch this out first. Maybe we wanted to, based on some condition, we wanted to run two different nodes or the workflows, right? So we can have those conditions separate out before we build a workflow. Moving on to next step, that is step 4. We need to design for real world exception. And here is the honest truth, right? Data will be messy sometimes, right? Or maybe data is missing, and APIs may time out, documents will be incomplete. The question isn't if exceptions happen, it's what does your workflow do when they happen, right? Does it is going to retry? Does it going to error out, or does it going to escalate to the human, right? So we need to design these paths deliberately. Moving on to the next step, that is step 5. Plan for async and long learning work, because not every workflow completes in one shot, right? We just trigger the agent and then it does its job and end of story, right? That's not how some most of the time it works, right? Because it require complex tasks or the processes which need to be run, right? So we need to plan for the uh, pauses, right? Or resume exactly where it left off, right? So we need to plan for those wait points where it will stop as while building this. And then finally, we need to instrument and test end to end. So before we have to go live or make it in production, what does success look like? We need to define our metrics, build our test cases, and just don't test the happy part, right? Try to break your agent, because as an admin, if I'm not testing that much thoroughly, right, the user will, right? So that's all. These are the 6 steps. Do all 6 and you will something that will actually work in production. Now we will see how all these looks like. I will just not go into detail, but I will just show you how these looks like within Oracle AI Agent Studio. Let me go on to the this. So now what I will do, I will just create a workflow agent, demo fin common. I will say type as workflow, and I will say this is demo workflow agent. What I will just create for now. So I was talking about multiple patterns, right? So these are those patterns, right? So normally, if I talk about the chaining pattern, the very first pattern, if I talk about, right? If I go again back to this slide, the very first pattern we talk about chaining. Chaining means if I go here, let's say if I have to add a first step as, let's say, LLM, right? I will just say, right, LLM for now. I will say you are an agent, or you are a document extractor, and will extract details from uploaded document. I'm just putting a random thing just to show you. I will just create. Okay. Now let's say if I need to add a next step, that is maybe sending an email. I'm just putting random steps here. So I will just say send email. Recipient can be abc@test.com, and email subject I can just write workflow name, and then hi, this is completed. And now what I wanted to show you, the chain, right? Because in chaining, step 1 input output becomes a step 2 input. So I can say, let's say if I need to provide some details, what I can do, I can go and check for that node, which is the LLM one, and put that output from that node. So that's how the step chaining comes in for these workflow. Next come is the parallel processing. So let's say if we need to do something in parallel, what we can do, we can go here in workflow control and say run in parallel. Now what it will happen, it will create uh, two different trajectory for this. Just to zoom in a little bit, just to show. So now we can have on steps for this and their on step for this. In the third one, we have switch, right? So let's say I can go ahead and say switch. So here we have to do multiple things. I'm not going to cover all this, but just to give you that how it is going to work, right? What we can write the case expression and then it will do the switching part. I will just want to delete and we can add that. Now the final one is iteration. That is nothing but the loop. So what I can do, I can go to workflow control and then loop. It will like collection, and then you wanted to do parallel processing for those event or the sequential processing for a loop, right? Because if let's say I was talking about row by row processing, right? So we have to do row by row processing in sequential one by one, or in parallel all rows can be run, right? So that's how it will be done, and we can have that array selected out for the processing. So that's a loop thing which we can use. So these are the main thing which comes. Either it can be a simple one, the step by step. Either it can be a looping switch run in parallel, or maybe a conditional one. So that's all about workflow design patterns and how we can design a workflow overview. Thank you for watching. We'll see in the next episode.